Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm super excited as we see people joining their morning with us and spending the next, 30 to 45 minutes just learning some life lessons. So some real quick introductions and some housekeeping things before we get started. My name's Erin Kopek, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at HireLevel. Today, I want to welcome you again. It's all about no filter, just facts. Teresa Katubig, our CEO and President, will be sharing her 30 years of experience with us, unfiltered, real, and just how she's started her business from the ground up and has kept it going for over 3 decades. Teresa's story, which you will learn more about, was built on grit and purpose. One of our core value words is grit, and I'm sure you will see that today as she presents her story to you. Super exciting to see. We have representation from over 7 states. We have some from Texas, some from North Carolina, Tennessee. So it's nice to see a vast array of people. I see new customers, old customers, and some of you may be new to HireLevel. So welcome to our program. And today's interactive. You do have the chance to ask questions. Feel free to do that in the chat or the Q&A box. If anything comes up throughout, I will relay that to Teresa. And Teresa, I pass it off to you.
Awesome. So, yeah, I think that the first thing we'll start with just get going, right? So Erin had these questions and she's got, what gave you the courage to start and what kept you going through when things got tough? And I had to laugh, what gave me the courage to start was I was working for someone else who basically showed me the door because she did not like the fact that we had set up a payment plan with the Internal Revenue Service. So it was someone who's in the same industry as I was in, but owed the IRS millions of dollars. And I had helped her get a payment plan set up, and she decided she didn't want to do that anymore. And I said, well, it's not going to work for me. So I went down the road and started basically a competing business. But at that point, I was newly single, just gotten a divorce. I had 2 kids, had just moved to Marion, and went down the road, and I was at the dairy, right in Johnson City, there's a Dairy Queen, and right across the street from it was a small office, $600 a month. I went in, talked to the landlord. He did not make me put a first month's rent payment down. And I started on basically like folding chairs, tables. I can't even, it's crazy. So we had a friend who said, hey, I've got some furniture. It's in Chicago. If you'd like to go get it. So $300 later, we went up and got that. And then we had a fully furnished office. And Erin can attest to the fact that we had that furniture around probably till about 25 years in. We probably just got rid of the last couple pieces here over the last few years. So if there's one thing that will be said about Teresa when she's gone is that she was always very frugal. So I think the thing is, when I started the business, I frankly was just too naive, maybe would be the word, too young and dumb to know what a risk it was. We got going. I went out. I'm a CPA by trade, but I was bored out of my mind. My background came from McDonald's restaurants. I worked for them for about 10 years. Went to Hamburg University, had just loved the drive-through, but boy, I did not love the hours. So I went back to college, became a CPA, decided that was the most boring thing I could do because I'm sitting in a room by myself and not enjoying it. So that's when I started doing consulting before consulting was cool. Got hooked up with this company that basically showed me the door in 1995, in August to be exact. So off we went. And the nice thing is, in the beginning, I used to process paychecks and I drive them around to businesses. And those of us that are older, remember when we used to have our deposits, we had to have our deposits at the bank before 2 p.m. to get credit for them. So that's what I would do. I'd go pick up the checks, drop off paychecks, and take the checks so I could deposit it in the bank before 2 p.m. Otherwise, they would not have cleared. So that is how I really got started. And the fun thing is, I see these challenges that people have with banks and different things like that. And I will say, as a woman business owner, which I never ever thought about, right? I mean, I can honestly tell you, I never felt like anybody thought, oh, she's a woman, what's she doing? Ever. I mean, I just always felt embraced and supported here. I started, like I said, in Southern Illinois, and always felt like that is how it was. So as the years have gone on and people have asked me, like, who was your mentor? What, how was it as a woman-owned business? Mentor wasn't a word back in 1995. Maybe it was, I don't know, but I never heard that word for, until probably 15 years in. And we moved into some of these bigger markets, St. Louis, Edwardsville, and those areas. And maybe mentoring became a buzzword at that point. But in 1995, it was just pull your bootstraps, get on it. It was not somebody's going to mentor me, other than maybe if I was crying. But I want to go back to the banks. The banks, I started with Banterra Bank years ago, and they actually were fantastic. And that's a small local bank here that they were very, very supportive of HireLevel, or at that point, Extra Help. So those of you that don't know it, HireLevel had a predecessor, which was called Extra Help. And we had that name from 1995 till 2018. Is that right, Erin? 18?
Yes, 16-ish.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And then we upgraded our name to HireLevel. And that is when we really moved to more of a recruitment to retirement type of business, where we really take in all of the things to do with human resources and things like that. So,
Okay. Yeah, I know, Teresa mentioned, starting in a small community in Southern Illinois. Now we've expanded to support thousands of businesses. Obviously, you built something that's lasted for decades, which is rare. Next question, was there ever a moment when you seriously considered walking away, and what pulled you through?
actually, no. I really have never thought about quitting. I mean, that may sound crazy, and maybe again, I was just too naive in the beginning. And then as I grew, I had enough confidence in myself and the team to know that we were going to make it happen. We made it through 2001. That there were several different recessions. The nice thing is, in '01, the recession didn't really hit us that hard. I mean, it just didn't. It was definitely a crazy time for sure. And we made it through that. But 2008 was probably the year that I would say I was more worried about going out of business. Just we just didn't have, we lost 300 employees in 1 month in December of '08. So that was a really big hit when you're trying to support, or, I mean, we had probably 30 employees at that time. We're trying to support all those employees. It was really scary. So, and that, to my team to this day hears us tell the story, right? We had took half the light bulbs out of all the lights in our offices in Marion, and our other offices. You wore coats to work in the winter because the heat was turned down. And, I went from going out to eat all the time to being a really good, we cooked a lot. And now that those habits have stayed for years and years now. But I think just really realizing that, okay, this can get really serious. So, no, that was a long answer, but no, I never thought about walking away.
Well, over the last 14 years, obviously, I've witnessed just your need to stay up with industry trends and pivot as needed when it's time to grow. And so I think that's really allowed you didn't want to stop. You just kept pivoting to continue to grow. And that's really what I've seen as well. What do you feel like, Teresa, was some of your biggest mistakes early on, and what did you learn?
Probably purchasing some payroll companies that I didn't do a very good due diligence on. That probably would be the first ones. And it wasn't so much that we couldn't make, because most of them, it was just poor service too many tax notices, just not having really tight business practices. You know, the business I bought did not have that, and we do. So when they came over and we tried to button it up and we tried to really make it so it's a good profitable business, those customers, you know, they turned over, which when you're purchasing businesses for multiple, you don't want to lose any customers. So that was probably the first one, you know, some of those school of hard knocks when you're trying to figure all of those things out. I think the thing is for me, you know, opening, like we opened here in Southern Illinois, we had an office in Carbondale, we had an office in Mount Vernon. You know, that was kind of in the days where you thought real estate was so important, and that's in the early days. And so we have these offices, and then you can't support, you know, budget wise, the rent, the people, you know, it was just too much. So I think just realizing that, you know, we pulled a lot of that back in 2000, back to 2001, pulled those back, really just said, we're going to operate out of Marion. We've got cars. We're 45 minutes away from 90% of the businesses that we service here in Southern Illinois. And we're going to just keep it that way. You know, we will hire people from those markets. We'll do job fairs in those markets, and we will just really try to streamline costs in that manner. And that's, you know, and even with the payroll companies, you know, we can travel to them. We purchased one in Chicago. You know, it didn't have enough customers to support an office. Chicago's a really hard market, so there was just no reason to try to do that. So I think it's all those different things that you just have to just figure out what's happening. You know, the other thing, and not to get into people wise, but I think some of the mistakes that I made, especially early, was getting close to people, you know, team members, that we were way more friends than we were business, you know, business things. I just got too personal with people. And I think you get burnt. You know, you things happen. You make decisions that they don't like, and then it becomes personal. And the one thing that I've had to really learn over the years is you can be personal with people. And, you know, I have my very close group of confidants here at HireLevel. But I also know when, you know, that I've got to keep people, I don't want to say the words arm's length, but really making sure that they understand that I'm the boss and I'm the business owner first, and I am your friend and your helper late, you know, second, unfortunately. You know, people can be real shitheads, and, you know, we've some things can be construed that we feel like is a positive and that isn't a positive, or people, frankly, there's jealousy involved. You know, I mean, with people see your success and they feel like that maybe you should be doing more, you should be paying more, or you should be doing whatever thing of that day. And thank goodness that I haven't had to deal with social media for, you know, the first 20 years of this business, because I'm sure I'd have some other posted about me. But in the end, I've got really thick skin. If anything's really happened over the last 30 years, I've gotten a lot thicker skin. And I just know that I'm going to do the right thing for HireLevel, which means I'm doing the right thing for the people working here, because I want to protect the business and keep it long term. So
Yeah, so we'll get into the people stuff here in a second, but before we move off, especially for those maybe newer on the call, Teresa, how did you know when it was time to grow or pivot? I know you mentioned earlier how it was started with a temp agency, and we really expanded into really being the HR resource. Talk to us about that.
Well, it's funny. So I've had different payroll softwares over the years. You know, we've stayed into light industrial staffing for many of our years. I think some of the things, you know, how do I know when it's time to grow and pivot? Well, one, I do a lot of industry resources, right? Attending events, really just staying on top of the pulse of the industry. So that's the easy stuff, right? That's the stuff we all do, and that. But, you know, we one time, I had some software that we used where the owner of the software basically told my attorney, it had gotten that far, that I needed to find new software. And frankly, that was it was a great moment for HireLevel, because it kind of pushed us to do something that we should have done years years earlier. And that got us really into what we call the HCM space, which is human capital management, or the managing, from recruitment to retirement. So where we have an ATS, right? We have which is applicant tracking system, sorry, onboarding, all the things that are necessary for a business to run its HR department. And, we went from being a payroll company to really being a company that can support an entire HR department with, hundreds to thousands of employees. And it just was really a great moment for us in general to be able to say, all right, we're going to take this bigger step. And that was terrific. So couple things on growing and pivoting. I think the one thing that we have done, even as we've done those things, is we stay true to our culture. And, as you add team members and as you add different things, we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose. So as you can hopefully all see that all the things that are behind Aaron, back to owning your impact and making differences in people's lives and being doers, right? Teamwork, all the things. That we stayed true to that. And that was the most important part of every time we did grow or pivot, we made sure that we stayed true to our core values.
All right. Well, that takes us on. Speaking of culture and leadership, we're going to talk a little bit about, just the real stuff. We have 55 people internal here at HireLevel, and we pay hundreds every week on the staffing side. So we definitely, if these walls could talk, we have stories about people. And so let's talk about that a little bit. What has been your approach to tough conversations or team conflict?
Well, first, let's talk about just tough conversations. Those of you that have known me, or even probably in this first few minutes, know I don't kind of, and I drop the F-bomb, but I don't F around, right? I don't have time for that. If one thing I've learned over the last 30 years is clear as kind. Enough of tiptoeing around, enough of, I just don't have time for that. And I think the thing for all of us as business owners or as leaders, if you start out and, we can all get into our social media, and to be real honest, I'm so much nicer now than I was 30 years ago, because I really wasn't very nice at that point, but I at least have learned how to maybe soften my words and put a couple little maybe please and thank yous on there. But I think in the end, no matter what, this is how it is. It's kind of like your mom, because I said so. There is some of that. And I don't want to ever act like I don't listen to ideas, that I am not open to improvements and things like that, because it absolutely is. But when it comes down to things like just salesmen come to mind, and those of us that manage salesmen or have managed salesmen over the years, not hitting numbers, things like that, those cut and dry, this is your job, and this is your job description, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? You can add to it, but you're not going to take away because of your excuses, because we all know about excuses. They're just that. We don't want to hear them. And that's really where I'm at. So we always talk about clear as kind, but I'm a leader sets the tone type of person. I laugh because I always apologize if I don't truly apologize, but I work out in the mornings. That is my thing. So when I get to work, and we'll talk more about that, I think that's actually on the next question. That's kind of some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, but I'll be late to work. And when I mean late, I mean like 8:05. And I will feel guilty about that. And I think the thing is, I want my team to know that it's important. Timeliness is important. Being who you say you're going to be is super important, right? I don't dress like crap and expect my team to look exceptional. I make sure I dress the part. My team dresses the part. When we send people to events, we all laugh because they all kind of have the uniform. Everybody understands that you do not go looking like a ragamuffin. You go looking like a professional, And I think over the years, I know we're not wearing suits like we used to, or quite as dressed up as we used to, but we really take great pride in having to being the best dressed or the best looking group at whatever we do. And I think that's super important to me. And that's back to tough conversations. I've had those, right? I had a gentleman show up and he had on, whether the Converse tennis shoes, I think, Aaron. I'm like, excuse me, what is that? So
Yeah, definitely, the leader sets the tone, and I feel like you've been a great example of that. So speaking of that, growing future leaders and succession planning and really identifying future leaders on your team, how have you done that over the last 30 years?
well, in the beginning it was, did I like you? Some of that kind of stuff, right? And then it got to where, no, we need people who can truly lead an organization. We need people who have a much better skill set. And, they always talk about, right? Hire people that are smarter than you in these things. Do it. Absolutely. You cannot not have people that are smart, or you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I mean, that to me is the biggest thing of all. Make sure that you have people that are going to help and push you and grow and say, hey, that's not going to work. We need to do something else. And we need to listen to that. So, that's the biggest thing. But I think the thing is that we did, and, we used to bring in consultants regularly and still do. I don't act like we don't. We do that. But it got to be where we wanted to build people based and surrounding the culture that we wanted here at HireLevel. So it is, the big thing for us is we just made our own leadership program, and we based it on 3 books, actually 4 different books. The first one is called Lunch, Meat, and Life Lessons. The second one is Oz Principle. Third one is How Did That Happen? And the fourth one is Change the Culture, Change the Game. And so we do that in a 2-year timeline. And we really work hard at picking out those, I don't know if they're buzzwords or what we would call them, but the things that are super important to our culture. And one of them, especially in How Did That Happen? For those of you that are looking for a book, if a book has had more to do with me looking at how do I lead and how do I make what is important, it is that book. It's written by Roger Connors, and he, in that book, there's several different authors on there, but the biggest line for me in that book is it's missing 2 words, and it is, how did I let that happen? And it's really taking the time to say, people don't come to work to do a crappy job today, right? That isn't why someone is not good. It is either, right, training, understanding the why. What should we have done differently? How did we let this happen to help this person reach their success? And that's the most important thing for us here at HireLevel. My management team and leadership team, and I'll kind of talk about that in a sec. We really, the very first thing they all know it now, right? Because I say, how did we let that happen, right? What did we do wrong? What did we miss in the training process? What did we miss that did not set this person up for success? So that is probably the biggest thing that has happened for HireLevel over the last, 10 to 12 years, is that book and that leadership program. So a couple things that we really also talk about is our leadership program is not a management training program. Do we have people that come out of that program that become managers? Absolutely. Is it a requirement to be a manager here? Absolutely. But we look at, there are a lot of team members that have no desire to be a manager. They just want to be able to lead, to be able to talk to our candidates in a professional manner. They all the different things that they can do to help themselves grow just as individuals. And the nice thing about that set of books is Oz is about personal accountability. How Did That Happen? It's about team accountability. And the third change the culture, change the game is about your business's accountability to itself. So that is why I feel like that has just been just a super. It's just taken us leaps and bounds above our competitors.
So Teresa, we do have a question coming in. First of all, we will be sharing the list of books. I will drop the links in the chat. But how did, Teresa, you create a program based on the fundamentals of these books?
Well, good news is for all of you, I had this fantastic team, Aaron Kopak being the leader in charge, basically got 80% of it, I think. And she might say more, but I think the other 20 was due to just changes we've made based on suggestions after the first couple of. We did a lot. The nice thing is there's questions in those books. We did, and we're happy to share kind of what we do. It's all kind of we do have basically an itinerary or a timeline of how we've got it. We base that off us. And then what's been the best part of that is at the end, we have them do an assignment based on, frankly, needs of the business. When we looked at different diversity programs, just being more inclusive. And I think when I use that word, I'm a very much bootstrap person, right? I'm not promoting you for anything other than you work hard and you deserve it. That's why anybody gets promoted. That's why anybody gets hired. We hire off the best resumes. But I think the thing for us is we have a very diverse candidate base and people understanding the words empathy. And, we have, I think I've got this on some of my notes later, we have a very big second chance hiring program that we work hard in the community to promote and talk about. And that's kind of one of my big, I'm very passionate about the second chance programs and making sure that we're giving hand up, not hand out. So anyway, so there's my answer. It's very long, but.
Well, that leads us into, purpose, mission, and impact. And, so one of the most powerful parts of the story is deeply rooted in a mission, and that's changing lives. So Teresa, why has staying mission driven mattered so much to you?
Well, in the beginning, so a couple things. So I just want to read our mission statement real quick. So we, again, when we rebranded, we kind of put this in writing. And so HireLevel's mission statement is bringing people with diverse backgrounds together, creating opportunities, growing communities and business, changing lives. And in the industry we're in, a job is, I think I want to make sure too, everybody understands that in the temporary business, 90% of the jobs that we provide for people are temp to hire. So when we started here in Southern Illinois, there were no temp jobs, right? Nobody's picking up people at the Home Depot to take them out to work for a day. That is not the industry we're in. We do the screening, or first I should say advertising, screening, all the things to get good people to put them into positions for companies who do not have, a lot of them don't have big HR departments to do that, or it's owner based and the owner just doesn't have time for that. We have the testing that can screen these applicants. We bring them in, we do drug testing, we make sure that they are going to show up. I can't say make sure, but many times that they can show up to work and do the things that you need them to do. So I think that's why I look at, so as I got over the years, when I first started, right, we had a box on our application that says, have you been convicted of a felony? And if anyone marked that box, I would basically say 80% of my employers said no people with felonies. And as someone who's been, I grew up right here, graduated from Murfreesboro High School in Southern Illinois, graduated then from SIU, which is the local university here in Carbondale. And as I looked at that and I thought, okay, and you start doing any research. I mean, the numbers, and I don't have that in front of me. It's been a while since I've done it, but the number of people that have felonies in our communities is kind of, it's like 20%. We're going to just say, oh, we're not going to give jobs to 20% of the population. I mean, I don't know about you guys. That's scary, because what else are they going to be doing? I mean, what else would they do? And I think that's where my passion came from, because a lot of it is, we would have these kids that didn't have, they had done something stupid, didn't have an attorney, and now they signed a piece of paper that says I have a felony. Well, 7 years, 10 years, any years, and we're not going to give them a job. So that would be where that mission, and it continues to be so important to me, is that we keep with that. So you're muted, Aaron.
I had some background noise, so I tried to mute myself. So I know there are a lot of moments that I can really think of where HireLevel has made an impact, but is there one moment that's special to you where you really made a difference in someone's life?
I had reviewed this question earlier, and I think the big ones for me is, and it's usually internal team members, where I will get, they'll leave because, Teresa was mean or whatever I worry, the business was whatever, whatever we did. Because it's never their fault. It's never them. And then they will come back years later, or I'll get a message a couple years later that says, hey, I just wanted to say thank you, right? You taught me things I didn't know I needed to know. And I really appreciate it. And I think that's the ones that I feel like, just to keep people on the path of keep people on the path of driving forward, because it's not easy. Anybody's, all of us that laugh about, and, older people that laugh about social media and how fake and stupid it is, because in the end, it's not perfect. And we're not perfect as leaders and as business owners and as managers. And the sooner people figure that out and just say, oh, all right, they're trying really hard. And that's what I like to see, is right, that someone turns around and says, oh, wait, they were working for me this whole time, and I appreciate it. So that was what I would say.
How do you keep your team connected to the bigger why, especially when business gets hard?
I think it's just setting the example of just back to getting up and coming to work every day. Right now there's a lot of uncertainty, and I don't mean that like I feel like it's chaos, because that I do not. But I think a lot of businesses feel that way. Unemployment rate is a little higher. It's a little easier to hire. So we're not near as busy as we have been over the last 5 years. Looking at how do you make a difference in someone's life that is coming in here, is a big one. The why on the HCM side, it is, as more and more states have all these different, right? Illinois PTO, just so many rules, regulations, things like that. How do we help them? How do we really be subject matter experts and show them the way? I think that has been that, not myself, but my team also, right? The management team, they have to also drink that Kool-Aid and understand that. And so I think the biggest thing is just helping them see that light every single day and talking about it day in and day out.
I think some other things that lead into our mission that we haven't really talked much about today, that I want to tee up for you, Teresa, is different programs that we have started throughout the year. So we have our HireLevel Difference program, charitable giving, and then I do want to mention our Baby at Work program, because I feel like that's a big part of our culture. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, so Baby at Work program. So that's probably, I'd say, almost 20 years old. So when we expanded into the St. Louis market, I was listening to a speaker, and it was super fun, because the guy said, I'm gonna say older, my age probably now. So he's, well in his 60s, and now I'm just turned 60. So he was well in his 60s, and he was talking about, he was running this book company again. It was more of a, like ours, workspace with office spaces and things like that. It wasn't a manufacturing facility, but he had all women working for him, and they wanted to do a Baby at Work program. And he was pretty adamant, right? This guy's old school. And he's like, no, we're not doing that. And I was his granddaughter, or his daughter, one of the two, is working for him, and just basically was just, hey, Dad, yes, we are, right? Yeah, we're doing it. So they started allowing women to bring their babies to work, and most of them, 6, 7, 8 weeks, bring their babies to work up until about 4 or 5 months. And I'm thinking, I think we can do that. And at that point, I think we had someone that was having a baby at that time. And so we tried it. It was fantastic. It was so easy. You don't even know the baby's here, to be entirely honest with you. We probably have had, what, Erin, maybe 10 at least,
Yeah, at
10
least.
babies over the years. Usually one a year, one every other year, somewhere in there, and it depends on what office or whatever. And like I said, we let them come. We're happy to share this information. I mean, this is a program that is well worth it. And, now as a grandmother, and I think about, because I did grandma at work too, right? I actually had babies here that I babysat, where it is so worth it, because I can't imagine dropping a baby off that you're still breastfeeding at 6 weeks at a daycare for a stranger to raise. And, I did it, right? I did that. And I just think to myself, how was I not just a mess? And so they do now. So it's 4 or 5 months, somewhere in there. It depends on how restless the baby gets. Some of them get very vocal and ticked off because they're sitting in chairs still at 4 months or at there. And once they get a little more mobile, they're ready to get down and get going. So that's when usually we do the handoff. But we still knew, and it's not 2020 in COVID, we basically had daycare, work from, or we had school work happening. I mean, we had kids everywhere, and to this moment still do, right? It is not unusual here in our offices to have kids hanging out, right? They've got beds under desks. They've got, they've got their own desks. My grandkids both have their own desk here that they set up and do their thing, because that's just the flexibility that we like to provide. And it doesn't cost us anything. And it brings so much peace of mind to our team members. And it's been terrific.
Anything else on that topic, Teresa, before we move to audience
Yeah.
Q&A?
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, we do have a couple questions coming in, but now is the time to drop your questions in that Q&A box. So Teresa, we have Jason here. He wants to know, with all the challenges that businesses face today, what keeps you motivated the most?
I think, again, Jason, I'm responsible for 55 people. I've got paychecks that I know have to go out, and I've got to be the person that shows up with bells on my toes, with a smile on my face, saying, let's do this. Is it easy? No, it's not. And there are days I don't want to, but in the end, we've taken that down to, I've got a great, and when we talk about succession planning, I shared those words on a few years back as I was getting ready to be 60. And you start talking about succession planning, and I'm like, I'm not dying, right? That is not what this is about. It is about filling your position so that you can continue to grow. And so they use those words a little easier, but I think some of it's just dig deep. It's all pretty cliche in the end, but I have a very set schedule. I get up every morning and I go to the gym. And if anything helps me stay with my mind, frankly, clears my mind, prepares me for the day, it is taking care of me in the physical sense, meaning eating well, exercise, great sleep, and the rest of these guys will all just sit there and shake their heads, because I'm not just doing that for me. I'm preaching that to my team day in and day out, of the importance of good health and taking care of me, because you cannot run a business feeling like crap. And so that would be my thing, just eliminate noise if that's what you've got to do. If something's noisy in your world, figure out what that is and eliminate it.
All right. Don't see any other questions. So I did drop my information in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out. As I said, this afternoon, I will share resources with you all. I will also, we did record this if you want to share it or view it later, or share it with someone from your team. Before we wrap up, Teresa, did you have any other last points that you would like to share?
No, I mean, I think the thing is for all of you, those of you starting out, feel free, do try to help others, give people that hand up. There's nothing wrong with being true to yourself. And one thing, it was funny. It was years ago, and it was right when Aaron, I think, had first started, and we love to have big parties. So one thing HireLevel is known for, we're going to have a big party this weekend, is we love having big parties, and we love bringing in great bands and just enjoying the heck out of not just it's enjoying life. I mean, that's what we're doing, enjoying each other, enjoying life. And we're at one of those events, and we had kind of a group that's sitting over there not having a good time. And Aaron just basically said, they shouldn't work here, right? If these guys don't understand how to have a good time, right? Enjoy life, travel, do all those things. And sure enough, man, they were gone here after a few weeks, after a few months. But I think the thing for all of it is stay true to that culture. If your culture is this is how we are, do not allow these outside influences, social media, whatever crap it is for the day, to change who you are and what you are true to. And that is one thing that at HireLevel, we to this moment will continue. We are true, we care about each other, and we're going to support each other. And that's just who we are. So,
well, thank you, Teresa, for your honesty and grit and no filter today. I think that's what we all were most excited about. I did want to say a lot of times after I get off a webinar, I have a question. So if anything comes up or a question sparked on how we can continue to keep the conversation going, whether it's questions about your HR processes or how the heck do you have babies at work, we're happy to answer or share any of our knowledge with you, and you can reach out to me directly. So I will send a follow-up email to all of you that attended today directly from my email address, and so you will have a contact.
Well, one other thing too, and we'll just put a little commercial in here. If anybody's looking for a fantastic company to support you in, if you're using some of these big box payroll processors, if you're, not with HireLevel as a customer, we would love you as a customer. And again, just reach out to Aaron or I, and we will get you on the road to success.
Yes, we would love to have you. Well, thanks for spending the morning with us. We do this type of thing once a month with speakers. So I did drop that in the chat as well, and we'll make sure you all have that information if you're not receiving our content. We did have somebody real quick that said, thank you so much. They're inspired. Appreciate your openness, and they've already referred HireLevel. So we appreciate that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, if you're a customer and you give us referrals, we pay for that. So make sure we know that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you.